Chapter 1. The Form. The form had been on his desk for 11 minutes. Erasmus Sterling, 714 years old, master of the Sterling Court, keeper of the old compact and, according to the woman who had placed the form on his desk, not exempt from standard HR protocol, had read it 4 times. Neville, Your Majesty, she has submitted a form. Neville, who had served the Sterling household for 4 centuries and had therefore seen a great deal of behavior he would prefer to unsee, did not look up from his ledger. She has submitted many forms, Your Majesty. She reorganized the entire court filing system in her 3rd week. We now have categories. This is not a category form. This is a request. What sort of request? Erasmus held the paper at arm's length, as though it might be a treaty containing unfavorable terms. She is requesting a day off. Neville's quill paused. Not because the request was unusual, because the tone in which it had been delivered was. Which day? Tuesday. This Tuesday? Every Tuesday. The silence that followed was the particular silence of a room containing an immortal creature who has been confronted with a concept he does not have a framework for. Erasmus set the form down, picked it up, set it down again. She has cited a reason, he said. What reason? Personal. He said the word the way someone might say treason, with a certain controlled horror. She has written the word personal in the reason field, and she has not elaborated. The reason field is optional, Your Majesty. I am aware that it is optional. She designed the form. She made the field optional. And then she used it to write personal and nothing else. He placed both hands flat on the desk. His rings clicked against the mahogany. This is a strategic communication. Neville closed his ledger. Or she would like Tuesdays off. Nobody would like Tuesdays off. Tuesday is the most productive day of the week. She told me that herself. She showed me a chart. I recall the chart. The chart had colors. It did. Erasmus stood and moved to the window. The grounds were dark. It was 2:15 in the morning, which was mid-afternoon by court standards. Somewhere in the East Wing, Marion Cole was almost certainly still working, because Marion Cole was always still working, and the idea that she might voluntarily choose to not be working was the thing that had kept him staring at this form for 11 minutes instead of the 900-year-old trade agreement that actually required his attention. I will speak with her, he said. That is almost certainly what she's hoping you won't do. He was already at the door. He did not hear Neville add, very quietly, to the empty study. Probability of this ending well, 14%. He reached the door, paused, came back. Neville. Your Majesty. Is it unreasonable? The form? No, Your Majesty. It is an entirely standard request. Then why does it feel like an act of war? Because you have never been told no by someone whose opinion you valued. It is a novel experience. I recommend sitting with it. I do not wish to sit with it. I know. He found her in the East Wing office she had claimed in her 2nd month. She turned a linen closet into an office, Neville had said at the time. She requisitioned a desk, 2 filing cabinets, a lamp, and a plant she has named Gerald. A plant. She talks to it. It appears to be thriving. Plants do not respond to conversation. And yet. Now, 3 months later, the linen closet was the most efficient administrative hub in the history of the Sterling Court, and Marion was on her laptop. She was always on her laptop. Miss Cole. Your Majesty. She didn't look up. She had stopped looking up when he entered rooms around month 4. You are not looking at me, he said. I am working. You have not looked at me when I enter a room in 7 months. You enter a lot of rooms. You have submitted a form. I have submitted many forms. You have submitted a time-off request form. I have. For every Tuesday. Yes. Indefinitely. That is what recurring means, yes. She was still typing. Her fingers were warm. He could feel the heat from where he stood, 4 feet away. The way he could always feel her warmth. The way a creature that runs at 15 degrees Celsius is perpetually, involuntarily, catastrophically aware of anything nearby that runs at 37. May I ask what you intend to do on Tuesdays? She looked up. Her eyes were the brown of strong tea, and they had the particular quality of making him feel as though he were being evaluated by someone who had already reached a conclusion and was merely waiting for him to catch up. Nothing, she said. He waited for the rest of the sentence. It did not arrive. Nothing, he repeated. Nothing. You wish to take a day, every week, in perpetuity, to do nothing. Yes. Miss Cole, you reorganized 7 centuries of court records in 10 weeks. You do not do nothing. You are constitutionally incapable of doing nothing. Last month, you alphabetized the wine cellar at 3 a.m. because you couldn't sleep, and the Burgundy section was, in your words, an affront to basic human dignity. And now I would like a day off. Why? She closed her laptop. This was, in his experience, the equivalent of a drawn weapon. Because I have worked every day for 11 months, Your Majesty. Because I don't have a contract that specifies working hours because you don't know what working hours are. Because last week, you asked me to attend a meeting at 4 a.m, and when I pointed out that 4 a.m. is not a normal meeting time for humans, you said, and I quote, "But you were already awake." You were already awake. Because you'd sent me 19 messages between midnight and 3. They were relevant messages. One of them was a photograph of a pigeon. The pigeon was on the treaty stone. That is relevant. That is a biosecurity concern. Her mouth did something. A very small thing. The corner of it moved approximately 2 millimeters in a direction that might, in certain light, from a certain angle, be interpreted as amusement. He was watching for it because he was always watching for it, because the almost smile of Marion Cole had become, over 11 months, the thing he oriented his entire evening around, and this was a problem he had not yet figured out how to file. Tuesday, she said. Every week. Non-negotiable. I would like to negotiate. That is what non-negotiable means. She reopened her laptop. He stood there for a moment longer, completely still, in that way that was more still than a living creature ought to be, and then he turned and left. She stared at the screen. She was not reading it. She was thinking about his hands, the way they had rested on the desk, flat and motionless, the signet ring catching the lamplight, the thin band beside it that she had never asked about. She had noticed his hands in her first week, and she had not stopped noticing them in 11 months, and this was the problem that no amount of filing could fix. She pressed her own hand flat against the desk, warm, living, her pulse visible at the wrist. She wondered what it felt like to him, whether the heat of her was as constant and impossible to ignore as the cold of him was to her, whether he stood 4 feet away and measured the distance the way she measured it, whether the 4 feet was a choice he made every time, or something that had calcified into habit because the alternative was closer, and closer was a country neither of them had a visa for. He was halfway down the corridor when he stopped, turned back, stood in her doorway again. What if I offered you something better than Tuesday? She didn't look up. There is nothing better than Tuesday. What if there were? What could possibly be better than 1 day a week where I am not explaining to a 700-year-old man that pigeons are not a biosecurity concern? He considered this. He considered it with the full weight of 7 centuries of diplomatic experience. the kind of experience that had negotiated trade routes and prevented wars, and once talked a French duke out of a duel by sheer force of patient reasoning. "Immortality," he said. She looked up. "I beg your pardon?" "I could offer you immortality instead of Tuesday." The silence that followed was not the silence of someone considering the offer. It was the silence of someone recalibrating their entire understanding of the person standing in front of them. "You are offering me immortality," she said slowly, "as a substitute for paid time off. It is significantly more valuable. It is significantly more permanent. That is rather the point." She stared at him. He could hear her heartbeat. It had not changed. This, in his experience, was more alarming than if it had. "Tuesday," she said. "Final answer." She went back to typing. He stood in the doorway for another 8 seconds, he counted, and then left. Neville was waiting in the corridor. "She said no to immortality," Erasmus said, as though reporting a weather event. "I heard." Neville made a note in his ledger. "Probability that you will offer again within 48 hours. 91%. Chapter 2. The Counter-Offer. "You cannot simply offer people immortality," Neville said the following morning. "I can, and I did. You offered her immortality as a substitute for paid time off. That is not how employment negotiations work. It is a superior offer. It is a fundamentally different category of offer. That is like offering someone a continent when they asked for a sandwich. A continent is more valuable than a sandwich. Not if you're hungry." Erasmus considered this. "I will try a different approach." "What approach?" "A written proposal, on proper stationery." "That will not work either." "We shall see." She found the first counteroffer on her desk at midnight on Wednesday. It was written on cream cardstock, in the precise, slightly archaic handwriting of someone who had learned penmanship before the invention of the ballpoint pen. It read, "Proposal. In lieu of recurring Tuesday leave, Miss Cole is offered the following: immortality, previously discussed, a private study with windows, east-facing, morning light as she has expressed preference, and the permanent title of Chief Administrative Officer of the Stirling Court, with full authority over scheduling, correspondence, and the wine cellar. Respectfully submitted, E. Stirling." She read it twice. The immortality she dismissed, the title she dismissed. The wine cellar authority she noted as strategically sound. But the east-facing windows, morning light. She had mentioned it once, in passing, 3 months ago, while standing at a window that faced west, saying she missed the way light looked at 7 in the morning. She had not said it to him. She had said it to Gerald, the plant. He had heard her. He had remembered. And he had written it into a formal proposal on cream cardstock, as though the direction a window faces were a treaty term. She sat with the cardstock in her hands for longer than the content warranted. Then she wrote back on a post-it note, "Tuesday, M." She stuck it to his study door on her way to bed. Neville found it the next morning. "She has responded on a post-it note," he told Erasmus. "I am aware. You wrote 3 paragraphs on cream cardstock. She responded with 1 word on a yellow square. She is efficient. She is unmoved. There is a difference." He opened his ledger. "Probability of a second attempt, 100%. I am already drafting it." "Of course you are." The second counteroffer arrived Thursday. This one was longer. Additional terms, a salary increase of 40%, a formal apology for the pigeon photograph attached, and a promise in writing that no meeting shall be scheduled before 8 in the evening without 24 hours written notice. Attached was a formal apology for the pigeon photograph. It was 3 paragraphs long. It referenced a precedent from 1743. She wrote back, "Tuesday, Also, your 1743 precedent is about grain storage, not pigeons. M. Friday's counteroffer included a car. I don't drive, she wrote back. I take the bus. It's fine. Saturday's included a house. I live in a flat, she wrote. It has a window. I don't need a house. She has rejected the house, Erasmus told Neville. She rejected the car as well. The car was a reasonable offer. The car was a Bentley. She takes the bus. You are negotiating with a person who takes the bus, and you are offering a Bentley. You are misreading the field. I am not misreading the field. I am expanding the field. You are losing the field. On Sunday, she walked into his study at 1 a.m. and placed her laptop on his desk, open to a spreadsheet. What is this? He said. This is a comparative analysis of your counteroffers versus the monetary value of 52 Tuesdays per year, assuming a standard hourly rate, accounting for mental health benefits, projected burnout costs, and the replacement value of a competent assistant if I quit. He looked at the spreadsheet. It has 14 columns. It has conditional formatting. The bottom line is highlighted in red. The bottom line reads, Tuesday is more cost-effective than immortality. You have quantified immortality, he said. Someone had to. The value you have assigned to immortality is remarkably low. The value I have assigned to immortality reflects its actual utility to a 27-year-old woman who does not want to spend eternity organizing your filing system. Is that what you think I'm offering? He said, very quietly. An eternity of filing? I think you're offering me something enormous without telling me why. And if I told you why? Then you would be having a conversation you're not ready to have. And I would be having a conversation I'm not ready to have. And we would both be standing in your study at 1 a.m, not ready to have a conversation. She paused. So let's talk about the succession problem instead. He didn't answer. His hands were on the desk, perfectly still. His rings caught the lamplight, the signet he never removed, the thin band on his left hand that she had never asked about and he had never explained. She was close enough to feel the cold radiating from him, the permanent 15-degree chill that she had learned to navigate around, never quite touching, never quite close enough for the temperature difference to become undeniable. You have a succession problem, she said. The council sent a letter about the Ashford seat. Nobody can agree on the inheritance protocol because nobody can remember which version of the charter they ratified in 1689 versus 1712. I am aware of the succession problem. I can fix it. I am also aware of that. I can fix it with a project management flowchart, 2 pivot tables, and a presentation I will deliver on Monday evening. It will take 12 minutes. The council representative will be speechless. You will approve my Tuesdays. You are very confident. I reorganized 7 centuries of court records in 10 weeks. I am appropriately confident. Fix the succession problem, he said, and I will approve your Tuesdays. All of them? All of them. I'll need the 1689 charter, the 1712 amendment, and the council voting records. Neville will provide them. And I'll need you to stop sending me photographs of pigeons. I make no promises regarding the pigeons. She almost smiled. 2 millimeters. He measured it against the last one and found it slightly larger. She turned to leave. As she passed his chair, her sleeve brushed his hand. Warm against cold, less than a second, 22 degrees of difference traveling up his arm. He did not move for a very long time. Neville found him 40 minutes later, still in the same position. She brushed my hand, Erasmus said. I see. It was incidental. Of course. It meant nothing. Naturally. Neville opened his ledger. Probability that you will think about the hand brush for the remainder of the evening. 100%. She fixed the succession problem in 3 days. She presented it on Monday evening in 12 minutes flat. The council representative, 300 years old, said nothing for a full minute. "Who is this person?" he asked Erasmus. "My assistant. She has solved in 3 days what we have debated for 40 years. She does that. You should keep her," he said. "She is not mine to keep," Erasmus said, and then, very quietly to no one, "She is not mine to keep." Neville made a note. Probability of self-deception holding, declining rapidly. Chapter 3. The Restructuring. It started with the meetings. On Tuesday, Marian's first official Tuesday off, Erasmus cancelled every standing appointment. "The council briefing," Neville said, reading from his ledger. "Cancelled. The quarterly budget review, which you have not cancelled in 400 years. Cancelled. The Beaumont delegation call." He looked up. "Cancelled. Tuesday is no longer available. You sent a one-line message to the Beaumont delegation that read, 'Tuesday is no longer available. Reschedule at your convenience.' They have been waiting for this meeting for 6 months. They can wait longer. Tuesday is not available. You have eliminated Tuesdays from the operational calendar of a 700-year-old court. I have optimized Tuesdays. You have eliminated them because one human asked for the day off." Neville made a note. For the record, this is the most dramatic scheduling change in the history of the Stirling Court. It is not dramatic, it is reasonable. It is unprecedented. Then it is a good precedent. By the second week, he had restructured the entire court schedule around her availability. "The 3 a.m. standing meetings have been moved to 9 in the evening," Neville reported. 9 is a more reasonable hour. You have never used the word reasonable in reference to scheduling in 4 centuries of governance. I am evolving. You are a 700-year-old creature of the night. You do not evolve, you calcify. Neville made a note. Probability of further concessions, 96%. By the 3rd week, he had learned what a grocery store was. This was Marian's fault. She had mentioned in passing that she spent part of her Tuesdays grocery shopping. "You purchase your own food," he had said. "Yes." "From a store." "That is where food comes from, yes." "I was under the impression that food was delivered." "To you, maybe. Some of us go to the store." "Why?" "Because I like choosing my own tomatoes." "You have strong opinions about tomatoes." "Everyone should have strong opinions about tomatoes." He had not said anything else, but on Thursday, Neville found him studying a photograph on his phone with the intensity of a general reviewing terrain. "What are you looking at?" Neville asked. "A grocery store." "On your phone?" Marian insisted I get a phone. I use it for messages and pigeons. And now for grocery store reconnaissance. It is research, not reconnaissance. It is surveillance of a commercial establishment because a woman mentioned tomatoes. That is not research. That is infatuation. "I am going to go to one." Neville set down his quill. "Your Majesty, you have not entered a commercial establishment since 1978, and that was a bookshop. And you left after 4 minutes because the fluorescent lighting, in your words, offended the basic principles of illumination. The lighting was offensive. The grocery store will also have fluorescent lighting. I will endure." He endured. He went on a Tuesday, her Tuesday, the one day she was not at the estate, and he went alone. Neville had offered to accompany him. "I do not require assistance," Erasmus had said. "I am 700 years old. I have negotiated with kings. I can purchase tomatoes." The last time you entered a commercial establishment was 1978. It was a bookshop. You left after 4 minutes. The fluorescent lighting was offensive. The grocery store will also have fluorescent lighting. I will endure. The tomatoes were the easy part. He selected them with the careful deliberation of someone evaluating a diplomatic gift, turning each one in his pale, ringed fingers. The difficult part was everything else. He stood in the cereal aisle for 9 minutes. A store employee found him there, holding a box at arm's length, reading the nutritional information with the gravity of a man reading a legal brief. "Can I help you find something?" she asked. "This sugar content," he said. "Is this typical?" "For cereal? Yeah, pretty much." "This is medically inadvisable." "Sir, it's frosted flakes." "I see." He set the box down. "Where is your bread?" She pointed. He thanked her with a small, precise bow that made her blink twice and then tell her coworker that the tall, pale man in aisle 7 was either a duke or a serial killer. He bought the tomatoes. He bought sourdough because Marion had once described sourdough as the only bread that takes itself seriously, and he respected that. He bought pasta, her brand, memorized without meaning to. He bought coffee because she drank it constantly and it baffled him. The ritual of it, the way she held the cup with both hands, the way the warmth of it made her close her eyes. He brought the groceries back to the estate in a canvas bag he had purchased at the register because he had not known he would need a bag. Neville met him in the kitchen. "You survived." "I survived." "And the fluorescent lighting?" "Offensive, but survivable." He set the groceries on the counter with the precision of a man placing diplomatic gifts. "She likes sourdough." "I see." "And pasta. This specific brand." "You memorized her pasta brand." "It was on the shelf. I noticed." "You noticed her pasta brand, but you did not notice for 7 months that you were in love with her." Erasmus arranged the tomatoes in a line. He did not respond to this. He did not need to. Marion found the groceries on Wednesday morning. She stood in the kitchen doorway, holding her laptop bag, and stared at the counter. The tomatoes were arranged in a neat line. The bread was placed precisely parallel to the edge of the counter. The coffee was centered between them, as though it were the keystone of an architectural arrangement. "Neville?" "Yes?" "Did you buy groceries?" "I did not." "Then who arranged tomatoes on the counter like a diplomatic summit?" "I believe you already know the answer to that question." She picked up a tomato, warm from the counter. "He chose these individually," she said, "didn't he?" "He was in the produce section for 11 minutes. I timed it from the car." 11 minutes on tomatoes. He also spent 9 minutes in the cereal aisle. He interrogated a store employee about sugar content. Of course he did. She described him afterward as either a duke or a serial killer. "That is remarkably not inaccurate," she said. "You drove him?" "Someone had to. He has not driven since 2012. The roundabout on High Street remains, in his words, an act of civic hostility." She put the tomato down. She picked up her laptop bag. "Where are you going?" Neville asked. "To find him." "He's in his study, pretending to read." "How do you know he's pretending?" "He has been holding the same book upside down for 45 minutes. "You went grocery shopping," she said, standing in his doorway. "I did." "For me." "For the kitchen. the kitchen was understocked. The kitchen has been understocked since 1952. An oversight. You don't eat. I am aware of my dietary requirements, Miss Cole. She walked into the room, past the midpoint, past the invisible line she had maintained for 11 months. She stopped at the edge of his desk. Why? She said. His hand was on the desk, the signet ring, the thin band, the long, pale fingers that never fidgeted. You like choosing your own tomatoes, he said. I wanted to understand why. And do you? No. A pause. The honesty of it landed with weight. I do not understand why someone would choose a tomato over immortality. But I am beginning to understand that the choosing is the point. Her hand moved. She reached down and touched his hand. Warm against cold, 37 against 15. Your eyes just changed, she said. I am aware. They're doing the amber thing. I am also aware of that. Does that happen often? Only around you. He said it simply, as though stating a medical fact. Only when you are close. Only when I can feel. He stopped. Feel what? Your warmth. It does something to the part of me that is not managed. She did not step back. Your hand is cold, she said. It is always cold. I know. His fingers turned under hers, palm up. She felt his pulse. One beat, slow, impossibly slow. Marion. Her first name. He had never used it before. Erasmus. If you do not move your hand, I am going to do something I have been trying very hard not to do for approximately 7 months. She did not move her hand. He stood. The movement was controlled, deliberate, the restraint visible in the set of his jaw. You should know, he said, very quietly, that I have not done this in a very long time. Done what? Wanted something I cannot file. He leaned down and stopped, his mouth a breath from hers. Waited. Are you going to kiss me, or are you going to stand there? She said. I am deliberating. You've been deliberating for 7 months. She closed the distance. His lips were cold and careful. Her hands came up to his jaw, warm palms against cool skin, and she felt the muscle there work once and go still. He pulled back an inch. His hand was on her waist, and she could feel the cold of his fingers through her shirt. Your heart rate, he said, is extremely elevated. Yes. I can hear it. I know. It is doing something to me that I would prefer it did not do. What is it doing? He didn't answer. His eyes were fully amber now, the brown swallowed by something older and less civilized, and she could see it, the predator behind the courtier, the creature that fed on living blood. Standing perfectly still with his hand on her waist, and his eyes full of something that looked like hunger and restraint in equal measure. He let go, stepped back, the cold receded. Tuesday, he said. His voice was half an octave lower than it had been. You should have your Tuesday. He left the room. She stood by his desk for a long time, her hand on the surface where his had been, feeling the chill he'd left behind. It happened on the following Tuesday. She was at the estate, not working, she insisted, just picking up a book she had left in her office. He was in the kitchen, standing in front of the groceries he had purchased that morning, with the focused determination of someone who had decided that learning to stock a kitchen for a human was a skill commensurate with learning to govern, and was applying the same rigor. You've put the milk next to the wine, she said from the doorway. They are both liquids. That is not how refrigeration works. I have existed for 7 centuries without requiring refrigeration. The concept is adversarial. She was laughing, actually laughing, not the 2 millimeter almost smile, but the full sound of it, and it did something to the room. It did something to the air. It changed the temperature of a space that had been cold for 400 years. And she reached past him to move the milk, and the knife on the counter caught her wrist. Not deeply, a thin line, barely a cut. But the blood surfaced, warm, bright, immediate, and the kitchen went silent. Not quiet, silent. The particular silence of a room containing a predator who has stopped breathing. She looked at him. His eyes had gone amber, full amber, not the edge flicker she had seen before, but the complete shift, the pupils narrowing to something that was not human, and his entire body had gone still, still in the way that meant something ancient and involuntary had woken up. Erasmus, do not move. His voice was half an octave lower. Please. It's a scratch. I know what it is. His hand was on the counter edge. His knuckles were white. The signet ring pressed into his finger with the force of his grip. I know exactly what it is, and I need you to understand that what I am doing right now, the standing still, the not moving, the very careful breathing that I do not actually need to do, is the most important thing I have done today. She held up her wrist. The cut was thin, already closing, the blood a single line. Does it bother you? She asked. Bother is not the word I would use. What word would you use? He looked at her, the amber eyes, the white knuckles, the absolute predator stillness. Necessary, he said. Your blood smells necessary. She did not step back. She stepped forward. She held out her wrist. Then take what you need. Marion, I'm offering. You don't know what you're offering. I'm offering you my wrist. I know exactly what I'm offering. I've read your court's covenant protocols, Section 9, subsection 4. Voluntary offering, witnessed or private, constitutes. You've read the covenant protocols. I reorganized the covenant protocols. They were filed under miscellaneous. I moved them to core governance. He almost laughed again, that involuntary cracked open sound. And then his hand came up, very slowly, and took her wrist, and his cold fingers closed around the warm skin, and he lifted it, and he paused with his mouth a breath from the thin line of blood, and waited. Yes, she said. He pressed his lips to her wrist, the cold of his mouth against the warmth of her skin. She felt the precise, careful bite, not the dramatic, fang-bared strike of fiction, but something quieter, more deliberate, an opening, and then the pull. She gasped, not from pain, from the intimacy of it, the sudden closeness, the way his hand tightened on hers, the way his eyes closed, and the expression that crossed his face was not hunger satisfied, but something closer to hearing a piece of music for the first time, something that had no equivalent in her experience. He stopped after a few seconds. He pulled back. He pressed his thumb over the bite, already closing, already healing, and he held her hand and did not let go. Thank you, he said, roughly, as though the two words cost him something. You're welcome. Her voice was not entirely steady. You can let go of my hand now. He did not let go. In a moment, he said. What did it feel like? He was quiet for a long time, like hearing someone think, not words, just who they are. That sounds terrifying. It is. He looked at her. The amber was fading, the brown returning. You are very organized. Even your blood is organized. I'm sorry? It was, I don't know how to explain this, methodical. Your blood is methodical. That is the strangest compliment I have ever received. It was not intended as a compliment. It was intended as an observation. A pause. It was also a compliment. They stood in the kitchen, cold and warm, and neither of them moved for a long time. Chapter 4. The Resignation. The week after the kitchen, everything changed and nothing changed. He still sent her messages at unreasonable hours. She still replied with one-word answers that contained, somehow, more information than his 3 paragraphs. He still stood too still in doorways, and she still didn't flinch. And Neville still tracked the probability of catastrophe in his ledger. But now she brought him coffee in the evenings, not because he drank it, but because she liked holding it near him, liked the way the steam rose between them, liked watching him watch the cup as though it were a small, warm mystery he had not yet solved. And now his hand found the back of her chair when he stood behind her desk, his cold fingers resting on the wood an inch from her shoulder, close enough for her to feel the chill, never quite touching. "You are hovering," she said, on a Wednesday evening, not looking up from her spreadsheet. "I am observing." "You are hovering. There is a difference. Observing involves distance." "I am at a distance." "Your hand is on my chair." "The chair is at a distance." She tilted her head back and looked up at him, upside down. His face, from this angle, was strange and familiar and ancient, and his eyes were the dark brown that meant he was in managed mode, and his mouth was the controlled line that meant he was thinking something he would not say. "What?" she asked. "Nothing." "Erasmus." "I was calculating," he said, "how many Tuesdays you have remaining." "Remaining?" "In a human lifespan. Assuming average life expectancy, adjusting for your caffeine intake and your refusal to sleep before midnight. Approximately 2,700. You've calculated my remaining Tuesdays." It seemed relevant. It seems morbid. It seems urgent. The word landed differently than he meant it to, or exactly how he meant it to. She held his gaze, upside down, and the question was there again, the turning question. The one that lived in every room they shared and never quite got spoken, and she reached up and touched his jaw. Warm fingers against cold skin. "That's a lot of Tuesdays," she said. "It is not enough Tuesdays." She almost said something. He could see it, the words forming, the breath she took, the decision hovering. But she turned back to her spreadsheet, and his hand stayed on the chair, and neither of them said what they meant. The letter arrived on a Thursday. It was sealed with the Beaumont crest, which meant it was from the council's senior faction, which meant it was political, which meant Erasmus read it with the particular expression he reserved for correspondence that was about to make his life worse. "The council has become aware," he read aloud, to Neville, to the empty study, to the particular quality of silence that a vampire's office has at 3 in the morning. "That a mortal individual has been granted decision-making authority over matters of succession, inheritance, and court scheduling within the Sterling household." "Ah," said Neville. "Granted decision-making authority is their phrasing. Not mine. You did restructure your entire calendar around her availability. That is a scheduling preference. It is not authority. You dissolved the Tuesday standing meetings of 400 years. I optimized. You abolished the quarterly budget review timing that has been in place since the reign of your predecessor. My predecessor's scheduling was inefficient. Your predecessor's scheduling was identical to yours until 11 months ago." Erasmus set the letter down. His hand, resting on it, was very still. "What do they want?" "Read the rest." He read the rest aloud. "Unprecedented and structurally untenable. A mortal with no blood bond, no formal title, no covenant protection, operating at the center of a pure-blood court." He set the letter down. "They want it formalized or terminated." "Blood bond or she leaves," Neville said. "That is the binary." "I will do neither." "Then they will do it for you. And they are not entirely wrong, Your Majesty. She has no covenant protection. If anything happened to her inside these walls, there is no legal framework that would... Nothing will happen to her inside these walls. Because you have ensured it, through personal authority, which is precisely the arrangement they are objecting to. She fixed their succession problem. In 3 days. She did. And their response is to threaten her. Their response is to notice what you have been trying very hard to pretend is not happening. Neville closed his ledger. She is not your assistant, Your Majesty. She has not been your assistant for some time. The Council has a 400-year-old protocol for identifying exactly this situation, and I am sorry to say they identified it before you did. I am aware of what she is. Are you? Erasmus looked at him. 400 years of service gave a man the right to one honest question per century, and this was the question, and they both knew it. Yes, he said, very quietly. I am aware. Marian found the letter on Friday. The filing system was hers. The correspondence protocol was hers. A sealed council letter sitting unprocessed on the king's desk was, by her own system, a deviation. She read it standing up. She read it twice. Then she sat down and opened a new document, formatted exactly like the time-off request she had submitted 11 months ago. Same font, same fields, same optional reason box. In the reason field, she wrote, "To protect the interests of the Stirling Court from political exposure arising from the continued employment of a mortal individual without formal covenant status." She printed it. She signed it. She placed it on his desk in exactly the spot where the original time-off request had been, and she went back to her office and packed her laptop into her bag. Neville found her at the door. "Miss Cole." "Neville, you've read the letter." "I've read the letter." She did not turn around. "I've also read the covenant protocols, the precedent on mortal access, and the 3 prior cases where a mortal in a pureblood court was removed by council order. One of them was in 1763. It did not end well for the mortal." "It did not." "I have no intention of being the 1763 case." "No one is suggesting." "The council is suggesting, and they're right." She turned. Her face was composed in the way that people who are very good at hiding pain are composed. Precise, professional, held together by the same organizational discipline she applied to everything. "He restructured his entire court for me. He eliminated Tuesdays. He went to a grocery store. If the council decides this is a liability, it's not me they'll target. It's him." Neville said nothing, because she was not wrong. "Tell him I said goodbye. And tell him the filing system is documented. It's in the shared drive. Folder labeled, 'Everything Erasmus will not be able to find without help.'" She left. Tuesday came. She was not at the estate. Her office, the linen closet, the filing cabinets, Gerald, the coffee-stained desk, was dark. The laptop was gone. The post-it notes were still on the wall. The lamp was still on. She had not turned off the lamp. Erasmus stood in the doorway of her office for 40 minutes. Neville found him there and did not speak. There was nothing to say. The room smelled like her, coffee and warm skin, and the particular scent of a person who is alive in a building full of people who are not, and it was fading. He went to the kitchen. The tomatoes from his last grocery run were still on the counter. They were beginning to soften. He had not bought new ones. There was no one to buy them for. He picked one up, held it in his cold hand. It was room temperature now, not warm, not cold, just the ambient nothing of a thing that no one had touched. He set it down and stood there, in the kitchen he had stocked for a woman who was not coming back, and he understood, with the clarity of someone who has had 700 years to learn what losing things feels like, that none of those losses had prepared him for this one. The other losses had been slow, aging, fading, the natural arithmetic of mortality. He had watched people grow old, and it hurt, but it was expected. It was the terms of the arrangement. This was not slow. This was a woman who had walked out of his life in 20 minutes with a laptop bag and a taxi, and the speed of it was the thing he could not process. 7 centuries of diplomacy, and she had outmaneuvered him with a 1-page form. Your Majesty, Neville, in the doorway. She is not here. No. It is Tuesday. Yes. Tuesdays were supposed to be hers. They were. This is not what I meant when I approved them. He put both hands on the counter. The tomatoes sat between them, going soft. The kitchen was quiet in the particular way that a room is quiet when the person who made it noisy is gone. I have made a significant error, he said. Yes, Your Majesty. The error was not the Tuesdays. No. The error was that I gave her Tuesdays and did not give her the reason. Neville said nothing, because the king had, at last, arrived at the conclusion that everyone else in the Stirling court had reached in month 3. I need to fix this. How? I don't know yet. He looked at the tomatoes. But I am going to need a grocery store. Marian's apartment was small and warm, and she was not sleeping. She was sitting on her kitchen floor at 2 a.m, with her back against the cabinet and her laptop closed beside her, and a cup of tea she had made and not drunk. The tea was getting cold. Everything was getting cold, and that thought was the wrong thought to have, because cold was his word, cold was his hands, cold was the 4 feet of distance she had maintained for 11 months, because the alternative was closer, and closer was. She pressed her palms against the warm linoleum. 37 degrees. Her temperature. Her warmth. The thing he felt from across a room, the thing he oriented around, the thing she now understood he had been circling for 7 months while she had been circling him, and neither of them had said it. And now she was on her kitchen floor, and he was in an estate full of vampires, and the distance between them was not 4 feet anymore. This was the right decision, she said aloud, to no one. To the dark kitchen, to the empty apartment that did not contain a 700-year-old man who bought her tomatoes. She did not believe herself. He found the resignation at 10 past midnight. She has submitted a resignation, Erasmus said. I see. She has formatted it as a time-off request. I see. She has used the form she designed. The same form, the same font. The reason field says, he stopped, read it again. She is leaving to protect me. Yes. From the council. From you. From what happens to you if the council decides she is a liability. Neville paused. She read the 1763 case files. She knows what happens to the court, not just the mortal. She read the case files? She reorganized the case files, in her 3rd week. She has known the risks longer than you have known your own feelings, Your Majesty. She told you to tell me the filing system is documented. She did. The folder is called Everything Erasmus Will Not Be Able to Find Without Help. It is. She named a folder after me. She named a folder after your incompetence. There is a difference. The muscle at his jaw worked, not from the insult, from the folder name, from the specificity of it, from the fact that she had, even while leaving, left him a way to find things without her. Erasmus set the paper down, picked it up, set it down. The gesture, the same gesture he had made with the original time-off request, 11 months ago, the same hands, the same desk, the same unbearable inability to process a single piece of paper from a single human woman, landed differently now. Everything landed differently now. Where is she? She has left the estate. When? 20 minutes ago, she called a car. A car. A taxi, Your Majesty. He went still, not the stillness of composure, the stillness of a predator who has realized, too late, that the thing he was guarding has moved. I need her address. You have her address. It's in the personnel file, the one she organized. He moved to the filing cabinet. He opened it. He found her file, the file she had created, in the system she had built, with the organizational precision that had undone him by degrees for 11 months, and he read her address, and he stood there holding the file, and he did not move for a long time. Neville. Your Majesty. What is a grocery store's operating hours? They vary. Many are open 24 hours. Good. He left. Neville stood in the empty study and looked at the resignation letter on the desk, formatted in the same font as the time-off request, and he opened his ledger and wrote, "Probability that he comes back without her, 0." Chapter 5. The Tuesday. The grocery store was, once again, fluorescently lit. The same store employee from his first visit was working the late shift. She watched the tall, pale man select tomatoes with the focused precision of a surgeon, and she said to her coworker, "The Duke is back." The serial killer? The Duke. Definitely a Duke. He brought his bag to the register. Tomatoes, bread, pasta, coffee, her brand. Cereal with an acceptable sugar content, researched on his phone at a red light. "Big night?" the cashier asked. "I am trying to convince someone to stay," he said, simply, as though this were a normal thing to tell a grocery store cashier at midnight. "With tomatoes?" It is a longer story than the tomatoes suggest. He drove to her apartment. He had not driven since 2012. The roundabout on High Street remained hostile. He parked on the street, walked to her building, pressed the buzzer, and waited. She answered on the third buzz. "It is 1:30 in the morning," she said, through the intercom. "Yes." "You are at my apartment." "Yes." "With a grocery bag." He looked down at the bag. "Yes." "You cannot come in." "I know." The invitation rule. 700 years of power, and he could not cross a threshold without one word from her. "You're standing outside my building at 1 in the morning because you know you can't come in?" "I am standing outside your building at 1 in the morning because I need to say something, and I cannot say it from inside, and I will not say it through a resignation form." "Then why are you here?" "Because I have done something, and I would like to tell you about it, and I would prefer to tell you in person, but I will tell you through this intercom if that is what you require." A pause. A long one. "What have you done?" He set the grocery bag down. He took a folded document from his coat pocket. He held it up to the camera above the intercom, though he doubted she could read it at this resolution. "I have dissolved the precedent that mortals serve at the pleasure of the court, effective immediately. Any mortal employed by or associated with a pure-blood household is entitled to the same covenant protections as a turned vampire, including immunity from council interference in personal matters." Silence. "You dissolved a precedent." "I dissolved a 400-year-old precedent. It took me approximately 6 hours. There was a vote. I won the vote. The margin was narrow but sufficient." "You called a council vote at," he could hear her calculating, 7 in the evening? "I woke several of them up. They were displeased." "You woke up ancient vampires to hold an emergency vote about mortal employment protections." "I did." "For me." "For the precedent. The precedent was unjust." A pause. "And for you." Another silence. He could hear her heartbeat through the intercom. It was faster than normal. Not the hammering of the kitchen, something steadier, something that sounded like a decision being made. "What else is in the bag?" "Tomatoes, bread, pasta, coffee, cereal with an acceptable sugar content." "You bought me cereal." "I researched the nutritional profiles of 14 brands. This one scored highest on a matrix I developed. The matrix has columns." "Of course it has columns." "Marion." He stepped closer to the intercom. His breath, the breath he didn't need, the breath he performed for her benefit because she had once told him it was unsettling when you just stand there not breathing, fogged slightly in the night air. "I did not restructure my court because you are useful. I did not learn what a grocery store is because the kitchen was understocked. I did not dissolve a 400-year-old precedent because it was unjust." "Then why?" "Because you asked for Tuesday, and I realized that a world without you in it, even for one day, is a world I do not know how to administer. That is a very bureaucratic way to tell someone you love them. I am aware. I have been trying to find a less bureaucratic way for approximately 7 months. This is the best I have managed. She buzzed the door. He heard the lock click. He picked up the grocery bag and climbed the stairs. 3rd floor. She was standing in her doorway in a sweater too large for her, holding a cup of tea. "You look ridiculous," she said. "A 700-year-old vampire king standing in my hallway with a grocery bag." "I am aware of how I look." "Come in." He crossed the threshold. The warmth of her apartment hit him like stepping into a different country. "Your apartment is very warm," he said. "My apartment is a normal temperature. You are a very cold person." She watched him set the grocery bag on the counter. She watched him place the tomatoes in a line. "You're doing it again." "Doing what?" "Arranging tomatoes like a diplomatic summit." He looked at the tomatoes. He looked at her. She set down her tea and walked over to him and took his hand. Cold against warm. 15 against 37. "You bought me tomatoes," she said. "I did." Again. "I will continue to buy you tomatoes for as long as you will allow me to buy you tomatoes." "That sounds like a very long time." "It could be." "If I turned," she said, "I would lose this." She pressed his hand. The warmth. 37 degrees. Her pulse alive under her skin. Yes, he would not lie about the cost. "You would be cold, like me. Your heart would slow. You would not need to breathe." "And the warmth?" The muscle at his jaw worked. "Gone." "And food? Coffee? The way coffee feels in the morning?" "You would not taste it, not the way you do now." "And sleep?" "Eventually, no." "And daylight?" "No." "And growing old? Getting lines around my eyes? Going gray?" "You would not age. You would look like this. Always." "And everyone I know? My friends? My sister?" He did not answer. He did not need to. She knew the answer. She had known it since she reorganized the Covenant protocols and read Section 12, Paragraph 9, the one about the cost of turning, the one that listed everything a mortal gives up in language so clinical it made the losses sound administrative rather than devastating. She had read it in her 3rd week. She had known the cost for 11 months. She had thought about it every time his cold hand rested an inch from her shoulder. "I'm scared," she said, quietly, without the dry armor, without the deadpan, without the spreadsheet, just the words. "I know. You don't get to tell me not to be scared." "I would not." "You don't get to make this easy for me. It's not easy. I'm choosing to lose sleep and food and sunlight and growing old and everything that makes me the warm thing you orient around. I'm choosing that. And I need you to understand that I'm choosing it with my eyes open and my hands shaking." Her hands were shaking. He could see it. She could see him see it. "I see you," he said, very simply. "Good." She raised his hand, pressed it to her cheek, cold fingers against warm skin. He could feel her pulse through his palm, fast, alive, the drumbeat of a mortal creature standing at the edge of something permanent. "You would miss my warmth," she said. "I would miss your warmth. But you would still have me." He looked at her. 700 years of composure, 700 years of managed mode, 700 years of the courtier and the diplomat and the king, and it broke. Not dramatically, not with a speech. It broke the way a very old, very tired, very carefully maintained thing breaks. Quietly, completely. In the kitchen of a 3rd-floor apartment at 2 a.m, with a bag of groceries on the counter, and a woman whose hands were shaking, holding his palm against her face. "I would still have you," he said. And his voice cracked on the last word. Cracked. The voice that had not cracked in centuries. the voice that had survived wars and funerals and the slow erosion of everyone he had ever known. It cracked on you. Then I'll take it. She lowered his hand. She did not let go. Not because you offered, because I want every Tuesday. All of them. Every single one. And if being cold is the price of every Tuesday with you, then I will be cold. And I will be scared. And I will learn to live without coffee. And I will miss the sun. And I will choose you anyway. Every time. That is what choosing means. Marian, this is not a decision you make in a kitchen at 2 in the morning. It's exactly a decision I make in a kitchen at 2 in the morning. This is where I make all my best decisions. I decided to ask for Tuesdays off in this kitchen. I decided to reorganize your entire court filing system while eating cereal at this counter at 1 in the morning. I decided. She stopped, steadied. I decided I was in love with you standing right here, holding a tomato you'd bought me, at midnight on a Wednesday. He went still. Not the managed stillness, not the predator stillness. The stillness of a man who has been told something so new that 700 years of experience has no framework for it. You decided you were in love with me, he repeated. While holding a tomato. Yes, it was not my most dignified moment. That was 3 weeks ago. Yes, you have known for 3 weeks. I have, and you didn't say anything. You didn't say anything either. You dissolved a 400-year-old precedent and bought me cereal and calculated my remaining Tuesdays, and you never once said the word. I said I didn't know how to administer a world without you. That is not the word, Erasmus. He looked at her. The kitchen light buzzed. The groceries sat on the counter. The tomatoes were in their line. I love you, he said. Simply, without centuries of weight or diplomatic framing or managed composure. Just the words, in a kitchen, at 2 in the morning, said by a man who had lived 700 years and had never once said them to someone who might say them back. She did not say anything. For a long time she did not say anything. Her hand tightened on his, and her face did something he had never seen it do. It stopped being composed. The dry, sharp, evaluating woman who had reorganized his entire world without once losing her footing, lost her footing. And her eyes filled, and she pressed her mouth together hard, and he watched her fight it and lose. Marian. If you say, "Are you all right?" I will file a complaint. You designed the complaint form. I know, it's very thorough. Her voice broke on the last word. She steadied it. Say it again. I love you. Without the bureaucratic framing. That was without the bureaucratic framing. Say it like you mean it, and not like you're presenting findings to a council. He took her face in both hands, cold palms against warm cheeks. She was crying and trying not to be, and he was 700 years old and had no idea what to do with his hands except hold her face and look at her and say it one more time, closer, with his forehead against hers and his useless breath fogging in the warm air between them. I love you. I have loved you since the chart with colors. I have loved you since you alphabetized the wine cellar at 3 in the morning. I have loved you since you looked me in the eye and told me pigeons are not a biosecurity concern. And you were wrong about the pigeons, but you were right about everything else. She laughed, through the tears, the ugly, beautiful, involuntary sound of someone who has been holding something very tightly and has just let go. The pigeons are not a biosecurity concern, she said. We can discuss the pigeons later. I love you too. She said it fast, like ripping off a bandage. I love you, and I have done a cost-benefit analysis, and it has columns. He almost laughed. The sound surprised both of them, a short, involuntary thing that he had not produced in longer than he could remember, and it changed his entire face. The controlled, composed, ancient face, cracking into something that was, for one breath, just a man in a kitchen who had been handed something he did not know how to hold. "Of course you have," he said. "It has columns. I would expect nothing less." She pulled him down by his lapel and kissed him, properly this time, without the careful distance of his study, without the restraint, without the 1-inch gap. She kissed him in her kitchen, standing between the grocery bag and the stove, with the overhead light buzzing the way fluorescent lights do, and his hands came to her waist, and her warmth flooded into him, and he kissed her back with 700 years of not this. 700 years of managing and composing and filing, and never once standing in a kitchen at 2 a.m, being kissed by someone who had chosen him over immortality, and then chosen immortality because it came with him. When they broke apart, his eyes were fully amber, and her heart was doing the thing, and his hand was on the side of her neck, cold against the pulse point, and neither of them moved. "Tuesday," she said. "Tuesday," he said. "I'm keeping the form, though, the time off request, even after." "After?" "After I turn, I'm still taking Tuesdays off. That's non-negotiable." He looked at her, the warm brown eyes, the lived-in hair, the sweater that was too large, the woman who had quantified immortality on a spreadsheet and chosen a weekday over eternity, and then chosen eternity because it came with the weekday. And he pulled her close, cold against warm, and held her. And outside the kitchen window, the city was dark and quiet, and entirely indifferent to the fact that a 700-year-old vampire had just learned what Tuesday means. "Non-negotiable," he agreed. "And you're learning to cook. If I'm going to be cold for eternity, someone in this relationship needs to know how a stove works." "I will learn how a stove works." "And you're not arranging the tomatoes in lines anymore. That's not how kitchens work." "How do kitchens work?" "You put the food away, in cabinets, not on display." "The tomatoes were not on display. They were in a line, on a counter, arranged by size." "That was organizational, not decorative." "Erasmus?" "Yes?" "Put the tomatoes in the cabinet." He looked at the tomatoes. He looked at her. He picked up a tomato and opened a cabinet and placed it inside with the solemnity of a man performing a state function. And she laughed. The full sound, the one that changed the temperature of every room it entered. And he stood in her kitchen holding a grocery bag with his eyes full of amber and his face cracked open in that involuntary almost smile, and outside the city was dark and quiet and entirely indifferent to the fact that a 700-year-old vampire had just learned what Tuesday means. Neville, sitting in the car 3 floors below, opened his ledger to a fresh page. He wrote, "Probability of a good outcome, revised upward." He closed the ledger. He did not need to assign a number. Some things were simply certain.